Showdown at Warg-Tooth Crossing, Chapter 6. Kale marveled at the sight before him. It might look like the same old dusty prairie as his neglected plot of land, but this was deep and scaly territory. Toth, that is, he reminded himself. He rode with 4 others on an errand to trade steel for Somat. Barth was with him again, but the 3 others he'd only met recently. One of them drove a cart pulled by a pack horse, while the others ranged about, keeping their eyes out. They were about 30 miles south of Warg-Tooth Crossing, and far away from any help. They had camped last night under the stars, and the weather had cooperated by staying clear. The temperature got quite cold at night now, with the onset of winter, but the days were still pleasant. The men seemed in good humor, and almost bored with their task. To Kale, that indicated that this was becoming routine and he could probably relax a little. But the cautious side of him could only let that go so far. Too many times he'd been ambushed during the war by Scalies, who had blended in masterfully with the prairie. Toth, that is. Relax, Kale, Barth said, riding up beside him. The Scalies want the steel to keep coming, so they'll behave. Don't you think that one day they'll have enough to be fully armed, and then they'll attack? Maybe one day, but in the meantime, more and more settlers arrive. We'll completely outnumber them soon enough. Seems like trouble waiting to happen. Make hay while the sun shines, Kale. Business is good. You came to us, remember? I know, Kale stiffened. Doesn't mean I have to like riding into scaly territory. Barth shrugged and rode forward. Kale wiped the sweat from his brow. Despite the chill air, the sun was warm and he was on edge. Suddenly Barth's horse reared up, almost throwing the seasoned rider from the saddle. A hissing noise came from beyond him, and Kale quickly dismounted Raider, drawing his sword. Barth backed his horse, then yelled, "Scorpions!" The other 2 mounted men pulled up, while the one in the wagon secured it behind. Everyone dismounted and drew weapons. Out of a hidden hole in the ground, 6 giant scorpions emerged, hissing with their tails up and poised. Once clear of the hole, they wasted no time and charged the 5 men wildly. Kale faced off against the scorpion directly in front of him. It was about the size of a large dog, with the tail and stinger coming up to head height. It made to strike with its tail, and Kale parried while stepping back quickly, narrowly avoiding the scorpion's pincer attack on his legs. Kale thrust at the scorpion's head to back it off, and took a quick second to glance around. The party was in danger of being surrounded. This would have to be resolved quickly. Kale stepped forward, leaving his left leg exposed. The mindless arachnid took the bait and extended a pincer to chop at Kale's leg. Kale shifted and brought his sword down on the pincer, taking it off at the elbow. The scorpion hissed while falling back, and Kale pressed the advantage. Weaving his sword in a figure 8, Kale confused the scorpion as it tried to follow the sword with its tail. The scorpion fell behind, and Kale lashed out to slice the end of the stinger off. Gravely injured, the scorpion turned to scuttle off, but Kale jumped forward to impale the beast through the carapace on its back. That slowed it down, but the monster fought on instinctively. The stub of the tail kept striking at Kale's back and side ineffectively. Kale placed his booted foot on the carapace, withdrew his sword, then swung and severed the head. The headless body ran forward into a rock, then fell over twitching. Kale looked over to see that the rest of the party was encircled. One other scorpion wasn't moving, but 1 man was down and the other 3 were hemmed in, frantically parrying stinging blows. Kale ran to the nearest attacking scorpion. It was facing away from him, intent on the attack, and did not notice him coming. He took a great swing and lopped the stinger off at the base of the carapace. The scorpion hissed crazily while mindlessly backing into Kale. Kale reversed his swing and brought his sword down, slicing into the top of the beast. He didn't cleave it completely in twain, but he managed to bash the head into a pulpy mass. The scorpion stilled, and the man in front of him nodded thanks while Kale reset. Kale's kill had broken the circle Kale's kill had broken the circle, such that there were only 3 scorpions facing 4 men. The men reformed their line and pressed the advantage. The maddened scorpions fought on despite their disadvantage, but were unable to land any more blows. Within minutes, they had been dispatched, and the prairie was quiet again. The team moved back to the man who was down. He had been stung in the leg and was moaning in pain. The leg was horribly swollen already, and the man's face was turning purple with his labored breathing. Kale looked up at Barth, who shook his head. With nothing to do but wait for the inevitable, Kale got out his wineskin and gave the man some water, holding up his head. He looked at Kale with frightened eyes, then arched his back in a rictus of agony. The spasm passed and the man lay dead. Kale closed the unsettling eyes. "Damn it," Kale said. "There was nothing you could do. Giant scorpion stings are almost instantly fatal," Barth offered. "Didn't know they were active down here this time of year," one of the other men said. "I thought they stuck to summer." "You never know in this god's-forsaken prairie, Plutz," Barth replied. "Get his body into the cart. We'll get him back to town for burial." Kale helped them put the dead man in the back of the cart beside the load of weapons. Once they were on the move again, he muttered to Barth, "I thought this was supposed to be a milk run." "Hey man, low risk does not mean no risk. This place ain't exactly civilized." Kale nodded and rode on. Presently the group topped a rise, which brought into sight a long series of mounds. Kale had seen this kind of thing before, and sure enough, many Toth began to emerge from holes in the mounds. Kale remembered that these mounds were their dwellings, which were mostly underground. Living underground protected them from hot and cold temperature swings that were hard on their reptilian metabolism. Never mind that now, though, he thought. It looked like the entire village was coming to greet them. Kale stiffened in his saddle. He had never seen so many Toth together in one place and at one time that weren't trying to kill him. Also, he hadn't seen many younglings or female Toth for that matter. The females tended to be slightly smaller and gray-colored vice green. The Toth continued to emerge from their holes and formed an informal escort for the team. They didn't brush up against the horses, but they were more than close enough for Kale's taste. Still, they didn't appear threatening, and the entire entourage continued to the center of the mounds. Waiting at the center was a Toth Kale recognized, Sliggeth himself. He wore ceremonial robes with a headdress, and he was attended by several senior members of the tribe. There was also a guard of about a dozen Toth directly in front of him. They were all well armed and stood steady in well-disciplined readiness. These would be the troublemakers, Kale thought, as the team rode on, although the 100 Toth behind them could prove to be an issue as well. As they got closer, Barth dismounted, and the rest of the party followed suit. Kale held Raider steady as he nickered nervously. Barth handed his reins to Kale and walked forward with arms outstretched. "Hail, Sliggeth, chief of the Toth," he spoke loudly. "We come in peace as agreed to trade." Sliggeth stood up and walked towards his guard, which parted for him. "Yes, Barth. You have steel?" "We do. You have the somat?" "Yes." Sliggeth turned to one of his senior tribesmen and said something in their sibilant language. The Toth moved away and out of sight. "The somat arrives shortly. What have you brought me?" "Please come to see, great chief." Barth gestured to the wagon, and the guards walked forward to take a look with Sliggeth at the back of the cart. The chief recoiled when he saw the dead man piled in the back. "Please excuse us, great chief," Barth said. "We lost a man just this afternoon fighting off giant scorpions." "Yes, they grow in numbers this year," Sliggeth slurred. "Very dangerous." He began fumbling in the back of the cart, looking at the assortment of swords, hammers, daggers, and axes. He motioned for his servants to come forward to empty the cart. Kale was doing everything he could to keep the two horses calm as the Toth milled around him and the cart. He especially kept watch on the well-armed guardsmen. They kept an eye on him too, and the tension was palpable. Still, he kept his cool and forced himself to keep a good scan of their situation, despite his annoying eye tick. It seemed that Sliggeth didn't recognize him from before, given he'd walked right by, or maybe he just didn't care. "Let me show you something special," Barth said to the chief. "Over and above the agreed weapons, Bull offers you this gift, a fine silver inlaid batleth. Barth reached into the bottom of the cart where he withdrew the cloth-wrapped weapon. He unwrapped it slowly, then offered it to Sliggeth. It shone brightly in the sun, as Bull had had it finely polished and sharpened. "Very nice," Sliggeth said. He hissed at more of his servants, who took the batleth along with other weapons. The servants began preparing something at the center of the settlement. "Join us for a drink of slitheth, while we wait for my servants to unload your somat." "Of course, Chief, we would be honored," Barth replied. The remaining weapons were unloaded, and most of the Toth went back about their business, while the servants brought out large wineskins. They began pouring a milky liquid into bone mugs. Meanwhile, Barth indicated to the team to tie the horses to the cart and join him. The horses were calmer now that the Toth weren't crowding around them, and Kale put a feed bag on Raider to make him even happier. He walked over to Barth and leaned in, asking, "What's slitheth?" "Fermented cactus juice. It has a hell of a kick, so be careful. I need you on your feet when we ride out of here." Kale sat down with the others in a large circle on the ground. The servants had put out mats for them, and they were joined by the chief's senior Toth. The guard hung back to watch the proceedings. It gave Kale a serious itch in his back to know there was an armed Toth not more than 5 feet behind him. He tried to put it out of his mind as he wondered about the slitheth instead. "Ah, good slitheth," the Toth chieftain said, as the drink was passed around to everyone. "Get ready all summer. Very smooth." Kale received his bone mug from a servant and waited for everyone to be served. The chief then held up his mug and drank, as did the rest of the Toth. Kale brought the strong liquor up to his mouth and took a mouthful. It was all he could do not to spew it on the ground then and there. It was putrid beyond description. The only thing that could be said for it was that owing to the high concentration of alcohol, it probably didn't have anything nasty growing in it. Probably. Kale looked over at Barth, who pleasantly took a sip and carried on a conversation with the chief. Say what you want, but the man could manage diplomacy when he had to. The others seemed to be dealing with their slitheth well. This wasn't the first time they'd tried it, so at least they'd known what to expect. Kale leaned over to one of the new men, Ken, he thought, and said, "You could have warned me about this stuff." "Now where would be the fun in that?" Ken replied. "When the hell do we get the somat so we can get out of here?" "Usually the chief puts on a little show, makes us wait a bit so we know who's in charge, then eventually loads the somat. Just be patient, it'll be a while yet." Kale was much more circumspect with his next drink of slitheth, and only took a small sip. The Toth sitting around the circle seemed to be getting more relaxed and animated with the drink. Kale wasn't sure if Toth who drank liquor became more aggressive like most humans did. He hoped not. The chief clapped his hands, and 2 of the Toth warriors got into the center of the circle and began some kind of ritualistic fight. They went unarmed and used bite and claw attacks that were held off before actual damage was inflicted. Kale thought that this is what must pass for scaly entertainment. Kale stifled a yawn, trying not to be disrespectful. As time passed, it began to grow dark, and Kale felt a call of nature. He stood up slowly from the circle and backed away to find a place to relieve himself. The guards still maintained their position around the circle and watched him leave, but the rest of the Toth seemed to be having a good time and didn't notice him getting up. Most of the slitheth was still in his mug, but even the small amount he drank made him feel fuzzy. Truth be known, what he really felt was disconcerted, never having expected to be drinking with 100 scalies. He found his way behind a series of mounds, then down a slight rise to a stream. He untied his breeches to take care of business, and in the waning light, gazed over the field across the stream. His curiosity was drawn to the way the stream was diverted into flooding the field, not to mention that the entire field was covered with many cloth-like tarps stretched over the surface. He didn't know a lot about farming, but he did know you usually didn't flood a field to irrigate it. You made channels to make the water available without drowning the crops. Also, crops usually need sun to grow. Then it dawned on him what he must be looking at. This was a cultivated mushroom field. The scalies didn't find the mushrooms, as Bull thought. They grew them. A rough claw on his shoulder pulled him around. Kale came around to face one of the Toth guards. Kale stepped back to refasten his breeches and glared back at the guard. The guard started to drop into a fighting stance. Kale responded by starting to draw his sword when he heard a human voice call out, "Kale!" It was Ken walking towards them, staggering as he went. "I was wondering where you were." He staggered around the scaly and put his arm around Kale in drunken affection. "What are you doing over here? Come on back and have some more to drink." Ken pulled Kale away, staggering some more, while the Toth guard looked on suspiciously. "Keep moving and come back with me," Ken whispered. "Some of these guards might get mighty touchy." "I was just taking a piss when the scaly confronted me. What the hell?" "Don't forget, they're only playing nice to get the steal. Stay with the group." "Well, thanks for getting me out of there. I didn't do it for you. You start a fight and they'll kill us all." Kale was quite sober as Ken brought him back to the circle. Thankfully, things seemed to be winding down. There were several servants loading thick potato sacks into the back of the cart, and Barth and the chief were now standing as they talked. The guard that had followed Kale rejoined his comrades, but never took his eyes from Kale. Kale didn't care if they had to travel in the dark. It was time to leave. Barth gestured at Ken as they began walking back to the cart, and Ken went to look in the back to count sacks. He glanced at Barth as he walked up with the chief and nodded. "We thank you, great chief, for your hospitality and your fair trade. We will leave your village now in peace," Barth intoned. "Yes, please, take a gift back to Bull. Here is my best slitheth," the chief replied. He had a servant hand a large wineskin to Barth, who placed it carefully in the cart. Barth bowed deeply to the chief, then took the reins of his horse into his hands. The whole party mounted up and began withdrawing from the village slowly, while accompanied by curious Toth. It wasn't until they had crested the nearest hill that the last Toth dropped back and fell away. "Stay closer to the group next time, Kale," Barth said as they rode into encroaching darkness. "You almost got us killed." "You could have told me they were touchy about looking around their village. You fought them in the war. I thought you'd have figured it out." They rode on in silence for a few more miles and made camp. Kale made sure he slept close to the fire. Scorpions didn't like fire. Back at the Horny Toad, after another day's travel, the band was greeted by an enthusiastic Bull. "How did it all go?" "No problems with the trade. We lost Will, though. Giant scorpion." "Damn," Bull said as he looked in the back of the cart. He rummaged through the sacks, counting and weighing them roughly. Then he opened one up and took a pinch of the powder to sniff and taste on the tip of his tongue. "Looks like Sliggeth didn't stiff us. He's still keeping to the deal. Get Will dealt with and have the boys load the somat around back, then come in for a drink. We're just getting started." "That reminds me, that wineskin is a gift from Sliggeth, his best slitheth." "Pour that shit on the ground," Bull commanded. He walked over to Kale. "How'd you like your first paying job out there?" "Good enough," Kale answered. "Shame about Will." "True. Got some new guys coming in, though, so we'll be fine. Why don't you get washed up and have a drink? Looks like you could use one. Moss will take care of your horse. Come on, you've earned a little fun." Kale allowed himself to be led into the saloon, seeing that Moss was taking care of the horses. Everybody was getting well into the swing of things. Bull walked up to the bar, then yelled out, "Free round on the house, boys." A whoop went up and everyone crowded the bar, and the barmaids furiously poured and served. Kale decided to let go and partook of the whiskey generously. He arm wrestled and played darts and even sat in on a hand or two of poker. Finally played out from the ride and drink, he found himself nursing his drink in a quiet corner. Most of the boys had passed out or gone to bed. He looked up to see Quinn sitting down across from him. "Didn't really figure you for joining in as one of the gang," she said. "Guess you figured wrong." "Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time." Kale snorted a laugh. When Kale got up, he staggered a little, so Quinn fell in beside to steady him. Kale looked over at her and found her looking right back. He made to open his mouth, but she put a finger on his lips and shushed him. Kale wisely kept quiet.